Hello, here we are again for one more video. This one is on outcome research, and we're going to focus mostly on depression. So this is a big overview that I will give you first, and then we'll talk specifically about depression, right? This is outcome research. I'm going to present you a meta-analysis first. What is a meta-analysis? Eduardo, again, with science, yes, because I think this will give us a good idea of what's going on the field, and because we believe that data is more important than opinions. So this is a meta-analysis that included 32 studies and included a total of 6,000 participants. For those of you that never heard what is a meta-analysis, you can do a study and compare two different groups, right? And then there's another author that does another study and compare different groups. I may have positive findings in my study, but the other researcher had negative findings. So what should we do? We need to pool all those studies and compare them as a group to see, okay, overall, are chatbots being helpful for people with depression or not? So that's a meta-analysis, comparing many studies all together. So this study was done by He, and it's a very well done study. It was published, submitted in 2022. So remember, guess what I'm going to say? This is again including old chatbots. You're gonna be tired about this, but next videos are gonna be more on the very updated chatbot studies. Okay, so again, this is a forest plot. This is comparing overall effect of the different types of chatbots for different type of problems. The first line of studies that you see is short-term effect for depressive symptoms. They're comparing 27 studies. And what you see here, this line, you see that at the bottom you have the 0. If the lines go from the 0 to the left, that's not good. That means that the treatment did not help. If the lines go from the 0 to the right, that means that it favors the treatment condition, that it helped. Now, if the line crosses the 0 line, that means that the finding may have been just by chance. So what you see here is that in this case, for depression, there was a significant effect. It was not by chance. When you put all 27 studies together, you can see that it's a small to moderate effect size. That means, hey, the change is kind of pretty decent or okay. But when you do that in the long-term effect of depressive symptoms, the second line, right, you can see that the effect is smaller. And that pattern repeats when you check for anxiety. For anxiety, in the short term, there's actually a kind of a very similar effect than for depression. But in the long term, it's not significant. So it crosses that line of 0, right? So if you go to the other one, right, for specific anxiety symptoms, you will see that yes, in the short term is significant, but in the long term is not significant. So this pattern is consistent across most of the studies. This video is specifically in depression, so I'm going to highlight. For depression, we know that in the short term it works. In the long term, the effect is pretty small. And when the effect is very small, we may consider this is actually a trivial finding that's not so robust. So there's another thing that they did in this study that is compare subgroups, right? And a few things that are interesting here is that when the chatbot was more personalized and was more tailored towards the individual, when the responses were, hey, Eduardo, how are you feeling? Versus when we feel this way, right? That's less personal. When we have those type of personalized responses, the outcomes were better. So important, if you are developing a chatbot, you want to be sure that the chatbots address the user, right? If they can use their name, that would be better. The other thing that they found was that when the responses were empathic and like emotional, oh, I'm sorry that you feel the way, oh, I can understand how you're feeling, those type of things also were associated with a higher efficacy of the intervention. And the other thing that they found was that when they have an icon, a persona that you can relate to, again, there was a better engagement. And that is something that is repeated across studies. So here they compare are there any differences by age or by gender or by dose? And across all types of disorders, they did not find a significant effect, except for specific anxiety symptoms and age, but it's almost not relevant, right? So overall, if you're very young or an older adult, as long as you're adult, that is fine, and there might not be difference. Why this may be relevant? Because when I talk to this with other people, they sometimes tell me, well, that may be super relevant for younger individuals. Well, sometimes younger individuals are so used to the cutting edge technology that they see this as like old fashioned, right? My child who plays FIFA, if you see how FIFA works, that the PlayStation is like unbelievable technology versus what we do in the research settings is usually a little bit more primitive. And sometimes older people that are not that technologically savvy, if that's the case, I don't want to do that typical stereotype. And if that's the case, they may appreciate this more than younger individuals. We actually have a study on older individuals, and that was the study that I mentioned in the first video in which I talk about bonding with the bot. Yes. So the point is, whether you're young or older, it doesn't change in terms of the efficacy of the treatment. Now, here, a quick summary of what we mentioned. Significant short-term effects, that's good. Long-term effects, not good, yes. I'm trying to be as simple as possible in my explanation. That's not the most scientific wording, but I hope you get it. And personalization and empathic responses are critical to improve the efficacy of the treatment. And another thing that we didn't mention is longer duration of interaction with the conversational agent was associated with larger pool effect size. This may be relevant because of a study that I'm going to mention in a few minutes. So let's go to another study that is specifically a meta-analysis on depression. Again, in this case, they assess the effectiveness of the intervention and which are the features that they prefer, that the users prefer. In this case, they included 11 studies that you have them here, right? And they did randomized controlled trials. That means that they did kind of very good methodological design. Let's put it that way. They're comparing the intervention, the chatbot versus something else. Now, the point is that when they compare to something else, what you see here are mostly wait list. And ideally, you want to compare to something that's an intervention, right? And the attrition rates, we talk about this in another video. They were around 20%, which is comparable to human face-to-face studies, and is better than other smartphone application studies, for example. So this is from the 11 studies that they found. They got a significant finding. This red diamond is the average of all the averages that you see here. And I don't want to get into the details of the statistics, but this is encouraging, yes? So this is specifically on depression. And what you see is most studies were done in Europe or US, as happens with most of the research, right? There's a lack of research sometimes in Latin America or in Asia, for example, right? Now, speaking of, I will show you later a study done in Asia and a study done in Latin America. So here, a few more things that are interesting is they did a subgroup analysis, and again, what did they find? That when they have the icon, yes, people engage with that, relate more to that, and the efficacy, hey, improves. So you want to work a lot on how that little icon looks like. You want to be sure that people can relate to that. And in most cases, there were no significant differences in other variables measured here. So improved depressive symptoms, this effect size is 0.54, which is like a moderate effect size, which is okay, decent. In this particular case, they did not compare short-term versus long-term as we did in the first one. And they do claim that, hey, chatbots may be a superior technology than other forms of technological interventions, which I agree with that. And again, the embodiment piece is an important aspect of this intervention. So let's go now to the two last studies. Yes, one was done in China And this one compared 3 conditions. The 3 conditions were the chatbot delivering the treatment for depression, an ebook explaining depression, and a chatbot that was a social thing, but was not delivering the treatment. So what did they find? So this is how the chatbot looks. It's not the most beautiful chatbot, right? But this is, again, a study that was done a few years ago, right? And what they found was that when they compare the chatbot, this one has the treatment versus the ebook versus the social chatbot, there were significant differences in all the main outcomes. Whether they compared a post-treatment or a follow-up, they did have a significant difference. And they did something called intent to treat analysis and per protocol analysis. Let's not get bothered with that one. But basically, they took all the ones that started the study, and whether they finish it or not, they included that in the analysis. They have a positive effect. And then they did only the ones that completed the analysis, and they still have a positive effect. So this is a pretty robust finding. This study was on a chatbot done in China. So unfortunately, we do not have access to that type of conversation unless you talk Chinese or simplified or Mandarin, right? But this is not something that we can use. But for me, it's very encouraging because we want to have interventions for depression that can help as many people as possible. And these type of things are encouraging. So now let's go to another study. Oh, sorry, here I have, in case you want to see it, this one is the chatbot that delivered the treatment for depression, and the symptoms decreased a lot, right? For the ebook, there was some difference some decrease in the symptoms, but for the social bot, there was a worsening of the symptoms. This is at the post-intervention. At the follow-up, they did improve, but not significant. So the point is, hey, just a chatbot is not enough. It has to be a chatbot that knows the treatment. And let's go to the last study that was done using a conversational agent in Spanish. This was done by Carolina Clos and Milagros Escoredo. This was done with the chatbot developed by X2AI or CAS, and it was in Spanish. It was the first RCT in Spanish. So that was good. We were proud of working on that bot and on that study. We did not find between group differences when we were analyzing depression or anxiety. We did find that for the anxiety, there was an intra-group difference. That means that those that were using the chatbot improved significantly from pre to post. So that's encouraging. This was a very kind of basic bot compared to what we can see today. And it was the first study done in Spanish. What we did see is that the more messages that the users exchanged, the more satisfied they were with the bot. We cannot claim that one is causing the other one because this is correlation, not causation. But what is interesting is, remember the first study that we mentioned, that the longer the conversations, the more effects of the bots. So this is something to keep in mind, right? We can keep them more engaged, and if we are able to keep them more engaged, there's more chances that they will have a better effect from the intervention, as long as we deliver the content of the treatment. Because what we saw in the previous study, just a chatbot is not enough. It has to be a chatbot that knows the treatment. Okay, this was all for today. This is a short video on depression and conversational agents. Future presentations will tackle parenting with children with behavioral problems. I'm hoping to have a very special guest, at least for me. Hope to see you soon. Please subscribe to the channel. Do click in that bell that's over there. And also leave me some comments. I want to know how am I doing, and help you understand the world of chatbots and mental health. See you. Bye.